The painting had been on the wall of the Alderton sitting room for 11 years, and Talia Forsyth posted it on Instagram on a Tuesday afternoon, like it cost her nothing. The caption read, "New addition to my collection, a little gift from someone very special." She'd propped the small canvas against a Yorkville apartment wall, the late October light catching the brushwork, just enough to show the richness of color. Raw sienna, cadmium gold, the particular gray-blue of a Lake Superior shoreline that Naomi's grandmother had painted with her own hands in the winter of 1971. Naomi Alderton's assistant, Lena, sent the screenshot at 2:14 in the afternoon with 3 words. "Please see this." Naomi was in a meeting with a collector from Vancouver. She excused herself, stepped into the hallway, opened the image, and looked at it for a long moment without moving. Then she sent one reply, "I'll call you in 10 minutes," and walked back into the room and finished the meeting. Before we go any further, drop your city in the comments right now. I want to see how far this story reaches. And if you're new to Ivory Secrets, subscribe and stay with me, because what Naomi did next is something you won't forget. Naomi Alderton was 48 years old and had built one of the most respected private art consultancies in Toronto from a single room in a Kensington Market walk-up 18 years ago. She had a gift for seeing what a painting was worth before it caught up with it, and a reputation for being the person you called when something genuinely mattered. Her clients included 2 provincial museums, a Montreal tech billionaire, and the kind of old money families who had stopped needing to explain themselves a generation ago. She had been married to Vincent Alderton for 21 years. He was 55, a real estate developer, who had walked into her life at an age she'd curated in 2003, looking at her like she was the most interesting thing in the room. And he'd stayed. First as her greatest admirer, then her partner, then her husband, and gradually, in a way she'd only understood in retrospect, as someone who had learned to use her name and her connections like a key that opened rooms he could not have entered on his own. The painting Talia had posted was called November, Nipigon, Oil on Board, by Naomi's Beaulieu Cowan, one of a handful of women who had exhibited alongside the group of 7 without ever receiving the same recognition. It was not for sale. It had never been for sale. It had hung in the sitting room of their Rosedale house because Naomi had promised her mother, the year before she died, that it would stay in the family. When Naomi came home that evening, she went directly to the north wall of the sitting room. A reproduction looked back at her, an extraordinarily good one, same dimensions, same frame, same slight lean to the left that Vincent had always meant to fix, but a reproduction. The texture was wrong. The depth of the sienna in the lower left corner was off by exactly the margin that only someone who had spent 20 years with the original would catch. She stood there for perhaps 40 seconds. Then she walked to her home office, sat down at her desk, and called her lawyer. Frederick had been Naomi's personal attorney for 14 years. He answered on the second ring. She told him what she had found. She asked him to pull every joint financial document, every holding company filing, every account that carried Vincent's signature alongside hers. She asked him to do it quietly and to have something on her desk by Thursday morning. "How serious do you think this is?" Frederick asked. "I don't know yet," Naomi said. "That's why I'm calling you first." She hung up. She made herself dinner. She ate at the kitchen table and held a book and turned pages, which is not the same thing as reading. Vincent came home at 8:30. He smelled of a restaurant she recognized. The kind of place where you take someone you want to impress. He loosened his tie and poured himself something from the cabinet. "Good evening," he said. "Quiet," she said. She turned a page. He stood in the kitchen doorway, with the particular stillness of a man, trying to determine whether the water is calm, because everything is fine, or because something is about to pull him under. "I ran into Constance today," Naomi said, not looking up. She mentioned the Criterion Gala, asked whether we'd both be attending. "Of course," Vincent said. "We go every year." Another page. She also mentioned she'd seen something online, a painting that looked very familiar. The silence that followed lasted 4 seconds. Naomi counted them. "I don't know what you're talking about," Vincent said. She looked at him then. She looked at him the way she looked at work. She was appraising. Directly. Completely. Without sentiment. "Yes, you do," she said, and she went back to her book. He left the room. She listened to his footsteps on the stairs, the guest room door, the specific quality of a house when someone in it knows they've been caught and has decided to pretend otherwise. She put the book down and looked out at the bare October street and thought very carefully about what came next. She called Constance Devereux at 9 o'clock. Constance was 72 and had been a pillar of Toronto's cultural and philanthropic world since Naomi was born. She had outlasted 4 gallery directors, 2 arts ministers, and 1 very public embezzlement scandal at a foundation she'd helped personally investigate. She was Naomi's godmother, had known her since she was 9, and when she answered the phone she said, before Naomi could speak, "I've already seen it. Half of Rosedale has seen it." That girl posted it with a geotagged brunch location. "I know." "The Criterion Gala is in 4 days," Constance said. "I know that too." A pause, then, with the particular satisfaction of a woman who has been waiting for exactly this phone call, "Tell me what you need." Naomi told her everything. She told her about the reproduction on the wall. She told her about Frederick, who had confirmed by Thursday morning that Vincent had, over the past 3 years, redirected approximately $9 million from their jointly owned holding company into a numbered corporation. Registered in Alberta, traceable to him through 2 layers of corporate structure. She told her about the Criterion Gala, the most important philanthropy event in Toronto's social calendar, held every October at the Harrington Ballroom, attended by everyone in the city's arts, finance, and civic worlds, who considered themselves to be someone. "You want to do it there," Constance said. "I want to do it there." "He'll bring her." "I'm counting on it." "Then you'll need something to wear." "I called Renaud this morning," Naomi said. "He's driving down from Montreal tomorrow." Constance made a sound that was equal parts amusement and respect. "You called a couturier before you called me." "I called Frederick first," Naomi said. "Of course you did." A pause. "What do you need from me?" "I need the right people to know I'll be arriving alone. I need them watching when I come in. And I need Talia Forsyth seated as far from the center of the room as possible, somewhere with clear sightlines for every camera in the space, and I need her to bring the painting." "She'll bring it," Constance said. "She's been talking about it. She'll want it seen by exactly the people who will be there." There was one more piece, and it explained how Vincent had managed it. Frederick had traced the chain. 3 months earlier, Vincent had quietly contacted the framing studio they'd used for years and arranged for November, Nipigon, to be collected for cleaning and restoration. The studio had done it without question and returned a high-quality reproduction 2 weeks later. The framer had not known what he was facilitating. The painting had gone from the studio directly to Talia's apartment. Vincent had been patient, methodical, and entirely convinced that Naomi would not notice until it was too late. She had noticed. She had noticed the way she noticed everything quietly, thoroughly, without announcing it until she was ready. Renaud Villeneuve Friday morning with 2 garment bags, a seamstress named Odette, and the focused energy of a man he was being asked to make something that mattered. He had been dressing Naomi for 16 years. He knew her well enough not to ask unnecessary questions. "Tell me what you want her to feel when she walks in and sees you," he said. Naomi thought about it. "Overmatched," she said, without quite understanding why. He pulled out a length of deep forest green silk, not emerald, not hunter, something older and quieter than either. He held it against her collarbone and tilted his head. "This," he said, "column silhouette, nothing that moves except you." "Yes. No jewelry except one thing that means something." "I have that," she said. She wore her grandmother's brooch, a small abstract piece in sterling silver, that Louise Beaulieu-Cowan had made herself, in the early 1960s during a brief metalwork period, worth perhaps $300 by any market measure, worth everything else by a different kind. On Saturday afternoon, 4 hours before the car was to arrive, her phone rang with an unfamiliar number. Is this Naomi Alderton? Young, unsteady in the way of someone who has rehearsed what they intend to say and is no longer sure they should say it. It is, Naomi said. My name is Talia Forsyth. A pause. I know you probably don't want to hear from me. Naomi said nothing. She waited. The painting, Talia said. Vincent told me it was in storage, that it hadn't been used in years. He said you'd agreed to let it go. She stopped. That's not true, is it? It isn't, Naomi said. A long silence. I looked her up this week, Talia said. Louise Beaulieu, Cowan. I read about her. I read about your family. Her voice had changed, the rehearsed quality gone, replaced by something simpler and harder to listen to. I swear I didn't know what it was when he gave it to me. I thought it was a reproduction. I believe you, Naomi said, and she did, which was its own complicated thing to sit with. What are you going to do tonight? Talia asked. I'm going to attend the gala, Naomi said, and I'm going to take back what's mine. What you do with that information is your own decision to make. A silence, then very quietly, he doesn't actually care about me, does he? It wasn't quite a question. Naomi thought about 21 years. About the man who had walked into her opening in 2 Susan 3 looking at her like she was the most interesting thing in the room, and who had gradually, so gradually she'd almost missed it, begun looking at her the way people look at infrastructure, essential, invisible, easy to take for granted. I don't think Vincent cares very much about anyone who isn't useful to him in a particular moment, she said. I say that, without cruelty. I think it's simply true. A sound on the other end that might have been a breath, or something that wasn't quite a laugh. Bring the painting tonight, Naomi said. Silence. Bring it, and let me handle the rest. What he did to me, he did to both of us, differently, with different tools. But he did it to both of us. Another long pause, then, all right. The Harrington Ballroom was at full altitude when Naomi arrived at 8:53. She stepped out of the car into the cold October air and stood for 3 seconds, the weight of her grandmother's brooch at her lapel, the particular edge of an autumn night in Toronto that makes everything feel exactly as awake as it needs to be. Then she walked. She was not late, and she was not early. She was precisely when she intended to be, arriving in the window after the entrance rush had thinned and the photographers had started looking for something worth their attention. Constance found her within a minute, falling into step beside her. He arrived 40 minutes ago. There was a problem with the table assignment. How did he handle it? Poorly. He's at table 19 now. Talia's at 16. A brief pause. She brought the painting. She arranged to have it placed on the display easel near the arts board section, under a spotlight, on consignment. A pause. The girl has instincts. Naomi found her table, table 1, the social and geographic center of the room, from which every other table was visible. She sat. She drank water. She talked about what the people around her wanted to talk about, and she listened with her full attention, and she was entirely present, because the most important thing you can offer anyone in a room full of people performing interest is actual interest. She saw Vincent twice across the room. Both times he saw her. Both times he said nothing. She watched the calculation moving behind his face, the arithmetic of a man trying to determine which move costs him least, and she watched him reach the same conclusion each time. Wait. She was not going to give him that. At 10:10, she walked to the evening chair. A woman named Audra Finch, who had known the Bokukawan family through the Arts Council for 30 years, Naomi said, I'd like 2 minutes after the endowment announcement. Audra looked at her once and then said simply, The floor is yours. She was introduced as Naomi Beaulieu Alderton. Both names, Audra had done that on her own. The room went quiet. I've been attending this gala for 14 years, Naomi said. Her voice was even, unhurried, fully projected without effort. My grandmother's work hangs in this room tonight. I'd like to say something about that, and about what I believe this community deserves to know. She spoke for 4 minutes. She talked about November, Nipigon, the painting, its history, a woman in a cabin north of Thunder Bay, with borrowed pigments and a canvas she'd stretched herself, making work that mattered, because she believed it did even when no one was watching. She talked about what it meant to inherit something like that, and what it cost when it was taken, without consent, or acknowledgement, or even the basic honesty of asking. She spoke without raising her voice. She spoke the way someone speaks when they have nothing left to perform. She said, "I'm not telling you this, because I want your sympathy, I never have. I'm telling you, because this room represents something my family has been part of for 2 generations, and I believe community is built on the willingness to see things clearly, including things that are uncomfortable. I am still here. I am standing at this microphone in my grandmother's tradition, and I am not broken, and I am not diminished, and I am not going anywhere." The applause started slowly, then it was not slow at all. She walked back toward her table. She did not look at Vincent. Talia Forsyth crossed the room to meet her halfway. She was 27 years old, and she was carrying the painting with both hands, the way you carry something whose value you have only just understood. She stopped 3 feet from Naomi. The room had not resumed its conversations. The room was watching. "This belongs to you," Talia said. "It always did. I'm sorry it took me too long to understand that." She held the painting out. Naomi took it. She felt the weight of the small canvas, the particular weight of something that had passed through her grandmother's hands before hers, and she held it and felt what it contained. "Thank you," she said. Talia nodded once and walked back across the room without looking at Vincent. He came to her table. He stood at the edge of it, and they looked at each other. And she let him look, because she wanted him to see clearly what was in front of him. "Naomi," he said, his voice was low, "please." She looked at him the way she looked at work she had decided not to acquire. Not without feeling, with finality. "Frederick files Monday morning at 8, she said pleasantly. "The Alberta accounts will be frozen by afternoon." "Nadine Holsworth on the holding company board has already been briefed. I'd suggest having your lawyer reach Frederick before 9. She paused. "I'm not interested in destroying you, Vincent. I never was. I'm interested in what's mine. All of it back." He stood very still for a moment. Then he straightened his jacket, looked around the room. Really looked, taking in the faces turned toward him, reading what was in them, and left without saying anything else. The room exhaled. Constance appeared at her side. "Joanna Lemieux from the Globe was at the north wall," she said. "She had a recorder." "I know. She's going to write something." "Good," Naomi said. Constance was quiet for a moment, then in a voice that had nothing to do with strategy. "How are you?" Naomi looked at the painting in her hands, the gray-blue shoreline in the lower left, laid down with a palette knife in a cold winter 53 years ago, by a woman who believed in the work even when no one was looking, who painted Lake Superior from memory in a borrowed cabin because the image would not leave her alone. "I'm all right," Naomi said, and she meant it in the way that matters, not the version you offer at galas to people who are being polite, but the kind that settles quietly in the chest after something true has finally been done. She rode home with the painting across her lap, and the city moving past the window. The lights along the Gardiner, the lake somewhere dark to the south, the particular October cold that belongs to Toronto, and nowhere else. And for the first time in 10 days, since Lena's screenshot had arrived at 2:14 on a Tuesday afternoon, she felt something that wasn't strategy, and wasn't composure, and wasn't the careful management of her own grief. She felt clear, the way a window feels clear after rain has moved through. Frederick filed at 8:15 Monday morning. The accounts were frozen by noon. Vincent's lawyer called before 3 requesting cooperation, and November, Nipigon went back on the north wall of the sitting room, in the same frame, catching the same light. The slight lean to the left was still there. Naomi looked at it for a moment, Then she got a level from the hall closet and fixed it. Not because it bothered her, because it was hers, and she intended to take care of what was hers, down to the last particular detail, for exactly as long as it mattered, which was the rest of her life.